You just walked in. I just met you. What are we doing here? What are we doing here? Besides, we're here to talk about pork.
Yes. So I don't know if you know, I'm a registered dietitian, nutritionist, and I'm also a certified diabetes educator. I've maintained that certification for 25 years, which
congratulations.
I'm very proud of. Yeah. It's been a labor of love. It's my favorite population to work with, but most of the work that I do now is communications. I do media and communications training. I have a podcast.
Yeah.
And I work with different companies and different food groups to just promote healthy eating. And I'm known as the guilt-free RD.
I noticed that. And I was wondering why guilt-free?
Yeah.
Like, why guilt-free?
I think, throughout my whole entire career, I've been in Chicago for my whole career, 30 years.
All right.
Yeah. I know you talk you lived on the South Side or...
I'm like, how are we just meeting if we have both been in this town this whole time?
I know. I learned a lot about you on your podcast. So I was
better
I
late
felt
than
kind
never,
of,
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. So I started off in a hospital setting. I worked in South Chicago. I worked in Berwyn and doing clinical, but also community nutrition and education. And throughout my whole career, I felt like my purpose was to help people get rid of the fear factor, whether it was about just food in general, like how to lose weight, how to manage their diabetes. There's all this fear, like, oh, I can't enjoy my favorite foods. I can't enjoy food. I have to give everything up in order to eat healthy. And so my mission has been to just help people enjoy their food with health in mind.
Okay.
But the enjoyment part is a really big part of it.
Okay. Well, good. Then you're in the right place. You're in the right place
a foodie. You are a serious foodie.
And that's the whole thing. I'm not even really a foodie. I just love to eat.
Exactly.
What I don't know could fill a warehouse, but I love to eat it. I like to eat it. And I guess with doing this for 30 years, do you find it either interesting or probably a challenge in your line of work that every couple of years we're mad at a different food group?
Absolutely.
Right? It's
Yes.
oh, now it's sugar. And before that it was, I don't know, eggs or what, you know what I mean?
Yes.
There's a new enemy every couple of years. How do you navigate that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a big part of what I do with my communications is we see these sensational headlines and these clickbait headlines. And, I used to blame the media. Sorry, I used to blame the media. But the more I learned was there's a lot of places in the whole chain of nutrition research and communicating the research. It's not just media, that things can get confusing. People think they want black and white answers, but the nature of nutrition science is there's some uncertainties. And so we're learning that it's important to communicate some of those uncertainties. Here's the best evidence that we have now. Here's what needs to be studied, and explaining why nutrition research is kind of hard to do.
And ever evolving, right?
Yeah.
Well, I will say the media is part of the problem, because in media, and I feel comfortable saying this, we are headline people. We see a headline and we're we just go tell everybody, because it's not really our job to much research it. We're kind of just helping spread the news. So, we are part of the problem as far as that goes. The important thing is trying to actually get the information and share the right story.
Right,
yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And I think what gets lost in translation is the actual science. And so one of the things that I tell people is one headline, one study doesn't change the body of research. It might seem like that. One day coffee is good for you, the next day coffee is bad for you.
Right.
We don't know what to believe. And so then people just throw up their hands and say, I don't know what to do, forget it. I'm just going to do what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And that's what we don't want. We want people to have more confidence and reassurance about the diet that they like and how they can make some tweaks to make it a little bit healthier.
And it's kind of like how they say it's not a diet, it's a lifestyle.
Exactly.
That has been a massive thing. And if you've listened to the show before, I've talked pretty openly that I've lost a massive amount of weight by eating more, a lot more, surprisingly, but more of the right things.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And even in the nutrition world, we're talking more about dietary patterns instead of single foods or single nutrients, because people eat, when we say diet in my field, we mean, what are you eating? Not a diet to lose weight or a diet to, improve your blood cholesterol or something.
Yeah. So, here in my world, diet is what am I going to deprive myself of today?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we're looking more at those healthy dietary patterns, and we are looking at, so what are people lacking? What are those foods or nutrients of concern that people are lacking? How do we get more of those into the diet? And that's a big part of the work that I do.
So how did you get involved with the Pork Association? I mean, how does this even tie in? I realize that pork has some health benefits, right? But I mean, how does that become such a big part of what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So about a year ago, they started this thing called Pork and Partners, with partnering with dietitians and other health professionals to try to give them more information and knowledge about pork. Because what they found in their research was dietitians felt good about pork, but they weren't really sure how to communicate to their patients and clients. Well, what's good about it? We know it's a protein source, but what else? And so they wanted them to be more knowledgeable and more confident in recommending it. And a lot of the research that they did too looked at pork is the number one consumed protein in the world.
Really?
So it's really part of this global cultural food scene, which I was surprised to find. So if people are eating it, how can we encourage them to keep that in their diet, but in a more healthful way?
Okay.
And one of the things with the Pork and Partners is that pork, when they looked at research, when people had pork on the plate, they also had other nutrient-rich foods. And that would be, vegetables, beans, whole grains. And so they came up with this phrase called like pork is a carrier food, because when people are eating it, they tend to incorporate other foods and nutrients that they're lacking. So I think that's really exciting.
Because they just pair well together?
Yes. Yeah. So pork has like these flavor nuances that pair with tons of different cuisines across the globe.
Yeah.
And it's so versatile. You can do so many different things with it.
I will say, just last summer, I discovered pork cookies. From some friends of mine are Vietnamese, and they introduced me to it. And I was like, what are you talking about? Pork cookies? That sounds terrible. And they were delicious.
Really?
Let me tell you, they were. I've never even heard of it before. And they were like, just, take a bite and reserve judgment. And they were really good. I'm like, I never thought I would. Pork cookies sounds like words that don't go together in my world.
Yeah.
But they were actually really good. So
good.
just something to look into.
Yeah, no, that sounds really interesting. And I know you're very adventurous with the foods that you try.
Yeah, I mean, why not? I like most everything. So I'm more adventurous, I think, in trying new foods as opposed to like preparing them. When I'm at home, and pork, because we're talking about it, I'm kind of like, I'll do a pork roast. I'll do like pulled pork. I like a good Cuban sandwich. That's where I'll use it. But I don't really use it for anything else. I feel like I could probably work on that.
Yeah, well, that's where you and I are also similar. I am a dietitian, not a chef. And so I like to keep things simple in the kitchen. And so I like a good recipe that has been tested that I can follow. And like you, just a pork roast. It's so easy to put it in the oven.
I cannot screw this up.
Right. Well, and that's the other thing about cooking pork that, again, being not the most culinary person in the kitchen, is I find that cooking pork is easier than other foods because it's a little bit more forgiving.
Okay.
And so, yeah, right?
It is.
Like, think about it. And, people are afraid of, cooking a steak or fish or something, and I'm going to ruin it. And with pork, it's so affordable. The new guidelines are to cook it to 145 degrees instead of 160, but have a 3-minute rest.
Okay.
And so that way it retains the juiciness. And even if you go a little bit above that, like I find it almost always turns out for me. It's not dry, it's not rubbery. So again, it's more forgiving in the kitchen.
I will throw that thing in a crock pot and just, see you in 8 hours. Like that's kind of where I'm at. I'm like,
keep it simple.
See you tonight.
Yeah.
See you tonight.
Absolutely.
But I was reading some of the stuff that you guys sent over, and it was like, okay, there's different ways to incorporate it into your meals rather than like, that's just my main protein. And I'm like, you lost me there.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where the recipes come in. And so but the concept of like, it doesn't have to be the center of the plate. It can be. Again, I'm a simple person, so I like a piece of meat, a side of vegetables, and a side of whole grain, and keep it simple. But pork as an ingredient is a really exciting, versatile way to prepare it. So if it's in a stir fry or in a bowl or something like that.
That's where I was, I guess, like, then what else would I do?
That's where you follow a recipe.
Okay.
And I've got some examples if you want me to walk through that. But it doesn't have to just be cooking. Now, I think one of the easiest things to make is a pork chop in an air fryer.
Ooh.
Like a boneless pork chop in an air fryer.
I'm the last person on the planet to get an air fryer.
So you got one or you haven't?
I don't.
Yeah. I was one of the last people because I saw these recipes and it was things like you can heat up French fries in it or you can have this breaded something in it. I'm like, I don't want to buy something that's not going to help me make more healthy food.
That's what I'm saying. I'm trying to stay away from this.
Then people are like, no, it's easy for, like a pork chop or a piece of fish or some roasted vegetables. And so the key is if you have the small one, you can only make so much in it. But if you have a bigger one, then you can do like the pork chop and the roasted vegetables at the same time. So that was the mistake I made, as I got the small one. And then finally I said, okay, fine, I got the wrong one. I gave that to my mom, and then I got a bigger one.
I don't want it to take up counter space.
I know.
Like I'm drawing the line. I'm not doing it.
Yes. So the one that I have replaced the toaster, and also like it replaces a lot of stuff that I would do in the oven. So anyway, I would just say, not saying you need to go buy one, but if you do, think twice about the smaller basket one and get one more that has like the racks, because
The tray, okay.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be huge, but
Okay.
I was the same way. I'm like, I don't have any counter space for this. I don't want to deal with this.
See, and when I have a dietitian, a guilt-free dietitian being like, oh, it's not a bad idea. Now I'm like, add to cart. Should I do that?
Especially, like I said, you can use it instead of the oven. So like in the summer when it's hot, it's a lot quicker to heat up. And actually you can make some really good quesadillas in the air fryer.
Okay.
So
crap. Sold.
Thought that might get you.
Yeah, you got me. You got me on that one. Okay, so sorry, back to pork because I'm all over the place. Outside of it, okay, it's your protein.
Right. So
it has a lot of benefits. Yeah. One of the things I saw was, it can have like mood elevating. I'm like, it's magical meat. It's got mood elevating. I
we didn't say magical, but there's emerging research for many different foods these days. You know, when the pandemic hit, mental health was something that was on everybody's minds.
Huge. And
right?
since, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's not gone away. So it's good. We're talking more about that. And there's a lot more research looking into different foods' impact on cognition, which we've been looking at for a while, but also mood, mental health, depression, anxiety. So a lot of this is really emerging research, but I can quote to you. Research shows that the nutrients in fresh pork like choline, zinc, vitamins B6 and B12 may help regulate mood and feelings of well-being. So this is like an area, like I said, of emerging research. You know, we never want to overstate something like that.
Sure.
During the pandemic, again, people were talking about this boosts your immunity and this and that. And it's like, whoa. We don't want to oversell something to people. That's a big part of what dietitians work on, is how do we convey the health benefits of incorporating something into a healthy diet without it sounding like it's a drug or a supplement or a magic food.
A magic food. Okay. See, and then you leave it to the media and I'm like, it's magic. This is why we're having this conversation. This is good. This is good. I'm learning.
Yeah. So the mental health and the mood stuff is more emerging research, but there's decades of research. You know, you mentioned pork is protein. We know that it's protein.
Yeah.
But it's high quality protein, and it's got a high digestibility score, and the nutrients in it are very bioavailable. What that means is our body can use it better.
Okay. So I don't know if this is going to take us down a gross path, but I have to ask you, because you said the digestibility thing. Because someone had told me like, when you eat a steak, like it's in your system for like a few days or whatever. Is this real?
Yeah, no. Yeah, all those things about like you eat something, it stays in your digestive tract, or you need a cleanse. Let's clear this up now. Your liver does the cleansing.
Yeah, I'm not doing no cleanse.
Your intestines do the digestion.
Yeah.
So all of that is just total fake news.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
See, I'm learning so much right now.
Yeah, we could talk a lot about stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay.
Not that we want to talk more digestion stuff, but
no, but it's good to know because they're, like I said, it's telephone. You know what I mean? One person tells you, they tell the next person, and pretty soon it's just a whole, bunch of BS.
And those negative sort of fear-mongering messages really stick. And
obviously, I'm afraid.
They do.
I'm afraid.
You're afraid.
The steak has been in my stomach for 3 days.
Right, it's a fear factor.
Good.
So that's what we want. We want to get rid of that. And I was also a supermarket dietitian for several years. I was the dietitian for Jewel Osco, and so I did a lot of store tours and worked with a lot of community and media, just trying to like help people. Like when you go to the store, how do you select foods? If you're at the meat counter, how do you select pork? So there's 8 lean cuts of pork, and I can read those to you because I don't remember them.
I'm like, you know what? I know it's lean. I'll tell you what I know about it is that, so my mom's a nurse, or she was before she retired, on the South Side forever, and would be like, this is lean. You can have this, don't have that. And I'm like, okay, no bacon, but, I can have like pork cutlets, and those are easy and I can't screw them up, and I can put whatever sauce on them that I want, and it kind of takes that flavor and I'm good. And it helps me get my protein in. Right. It tastes good. I can cook it. sold. Anything beyond that, I'm kind of like,
Exactly.
I couldn't even tell you what cut is what.
Exactly. And you can always talk to the butcher. People don't, like in this day and age, there's probably like apps for that or whatever, but talking to the butcher is always an option. Whenever I want to make like my sister-in-law's Italian beef, I can never remember what the roast is. So I ask him. So you can always do that. But I have the list of 8, but then I have an easier way to remember it because I can't remember the list.
I'm like, good. Talk to me with the easy one.
Yeah. So first I have to list the 8.
Yeah.
So, and by the way, lean means it's less than 10 grams of fat per 3-ounce serving.
Okay.
And that's defined by the FDA. So 8 cuts, including pork tenderloin, the one you're throwing in the oven.
Yeah.
Sirloin pork chop, most of your pork chops. Sirloin pork chop, sirloin pork roast, New York pork chop, 96% lean ground pork, New York pork roast, porterhouse pork chop, and ribeye pork chop. So the easy way to say that is pork loins, including sirloin roast, and most pork chops are the leaner cuts. So sometimes we say
ground pork.
Yeah, but it's a great way to throw in a substitute if you want to just have some variety. And that's another message that dietitians really want to convey. When we say eat a variety of foods, it sounds kind of boring and like, what does that mean? The reason we encourage variety is because then you get a lot of different important nutrients into your diet. So you could eat healthy foods, but if you're eating the same foods every day, bananas are great, but they don't have the same nutrients as berries. So you want that variety so that you're getting a well-rounded intake of important nutrients.
And for me, it's like if I'm going to eat the same, because I do eat the same like 5 things, then I get bored and I'm like, let's just go to Dairy Queen. You know what I mean? So like that, I thought it was more like, if you keep variety in it, you won't get bored and you'll stay on track.
Right.
So there's that.
Yeah, it's more about getting a variety of nutrients in. Okay. And, as a dietitian, like I think about food all day. Most people don't. You might.
I definitely do.
But most people don't want to take up all that brain space to think about food all day. And they don't necessarily think they need to know the nutrient aspect. So we do like to lead with the flavor and the enjoyment factor and then hook them in and say, okay, this is what else it's good for.
To me, I honestly, and this is like, we don't have to go too far down the rabbit hole, but I think a lot of people think about food a lot more than they admit.
That's true.
I think that and not only like, what are we going to eat later? It's what am I going to cook later? It's not even that. I honestly think it's like kind of an anxiety thing too, at least for like food lovers.
Yes.
So I think it's on people's brains a lot more than anybody wants to talk about.
That's a good point.
Why I'm like, let's just.
I think they don't maybe want it to be taking up that real estate.
Yeah, it's taking up a lot of energy. Yeah, which is why, like, you're putting it in a positive place.
I hope so.
I'm trying just to be like, yes, I'm thinking about it. We may as well discuss it. So it's one of those things.
Yeah,
it's an anxiety alleviation, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a big part of what I do, and that's the guilt-free thing, is I want to reassure people. Your food is safe. Your food is wholesome. We have a very safe food supply. And also the agriculture aspect.
Yeah.
Farmers, ranchers, producers work very hard every day to bring us safe food. You don't really need to worry about those things. You want to think about, how can I amp up the nutrition? For me, to talk to somebody about eating healthy, it's more about what are you missing that you could include in your diet versus what you might want to take out of your diet.
Okay.
And so, like, we know across the board, most people are not getting enough produce, fruits and vegetables.
For sure.
Across the board. Like, it's like 9 out of 10 people do not get enough produce. So an easy place to start is trying to make sure you get a fruit or a vegetable at every meal and snack. I mean, that's tall order, but like in little baby steps.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times, regarding the agriculture aspect, they're like, well, I hear about produce and pesticides, or, produce is expensive. And this is where I say, okay, it doesn't have to be fresh to count as a fruit or a vegetable in your diet. It could be frozen, it could be canned, it could be dried, it could be a juice. All of those have the nutrition.
Okay.
So don't try to aim for such a high standard.
There's no way. I mean, I try to keep my produce fresh. Like, I don't do anything canned. I will do frozen though.
Yeah.
Like, do not play it, because otherwise I'll buy it and then it'll go bad before I even have a chance to eat it. So I'm not going to do that. But yeah, frozen for sure.
Exactly. And that's part of the thing that I work with people is like, because I'm the same way. I used to say when I was a grocery store dietitian, like if you buy all this stuff and it goes bad, like it gets tucked in that crisper drawer, it
totally
gets forgotten, it goes rotten, you're throwing your cash in the trash. So don't do that. So it does take a little bit of experimentation. How much fresh produce do you need for that week? And then supplement with the frozen the canned if you want, dried fruits and vegetables, or dried fruits, and juices like that can supplement when you're running low.
Yeah.
And then keeping an eye on that food waste. That's a big topic these days too.
So it is. And, I saw in the notes as far as like, okay, so pork is it more sustainable? Is it where does this come in?
Yes. So a lot of questions about sustainability, and I've done a lot of work in that area. I worked for the Dairy Council for 8 years, but I also did my master's research on dairy years before that.
But that's become such a word that now people throw it around where I'm like, I don't even really want to say it because I'm not sure what angle we're taking here. Yeah. I don't know what I don't know enough about it.
And sustainability doesn't really have a specific definition, but it is definitely more than what's happening at the farm and on the environment. There's an economic sustainability. There's a nutrition human aspect to it, that affordable, accessible nutrition.
So affordability is a big thing though, because obviously right now everything is a crazy ripoff. Nobody is making enough money. Mm-hmm. And we're trying to feed our bellies. You know what I mean? I've also been super open about I don't even go to as many restaurants as I used to anymore because who's got money to do that? I'm trying to keep food in my own fridge right now.
Yeah, for sure.
So when it comes to affordability is that a bonus if you're leaning into pork as far as grocery shopping?
Yeah, absolutely. Eating healthy on a budget was a big topic that I talked about a lot as a supermarket dietitian, but it applies to everybody every day. Those grocery prices are going up. And so, part of that is making sure you're not throwing food away and managing your food waste. And the other part of that is knowing that farmers are far more sustainable today than they were decades ago. So sustainability is like a new topic for us, but for farmers, they've been doing that for decades.
Yeah.
That's been important to them because that helps their business be sustainable. That helps them take care of the land and be good stewards of the land and the animals so that they can pass it down to future generations. So it's very top of mind, but specifically with pork production, over the last 6 decades or so, the production has evolved to use 75% less land, 25% less water, 7% less energy, and producing 8% fewer carbon emissions. So when I talk about sustainability, and I interview a lot of different people on my podcast about this because I am not the sustainability expert, but I talk to farmers and ranchers and producers and people in doing research in that space. And the biggest point I want to convey is it's not, is it sustainable or not? Is it more sustainable than it was yesterday? Are we moving in the right direction?
Okay.
And a really big thing is U.S. farms are very sustainable. Globally, that's another issue, and it's very complex because what we do here in the U.S. cannot necessarily be copied and pasted into other countries for a variety of reasons.
Right.
So that's something that I think gets lost when we start hearing these statistics and, celebrities talk about, having their, vegan menu at the award shows when they flew in on their private jets.
Come on, right. I'm like, you know what? That doesn't even count. That doesn't even count. I'm not going to be scolded by somebody who's riding around in a jet.
Right.
Get out of here.
Their heart's in the right place. It could be very well intentioned, but they don't really know the facts. And sustainability, it's a very complex issue. Different regions have different things that matter. Water use is more important in some regions than others.
Right.
So farming is a very high-tech, complicated business. And so when I see people who don't really know what they're talking about saying we should do this or we should do that, I say we should ask the farmers and ranchers and producers. They're the ones who know and need to make those decisions every day on their own farms.
Well, I appreciate you sticking up for the farmers.
Absolutely.
That's nice.
Yeah. And, when I worked for the Dairy Council for 8 years, we were just getting into having the farmers use their voices and tell their stories more. And I'll tell you, they were very resistant because they just wanted to go out in their fields and work. But we told them your voice, your stories, they're so important. And consumers now want to hear that stuff. They really weren't that interested before.
That's true. I feel like the way people shop and the way they make their decisions has changed.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And when I say they, I mean me, because it is one of those.
We're consumers too.
The more we learn,
right?
And I'm like, oh God, I wouldn't have even thought of that before. Mm-hmm. So I understand that. So I know that I need to get my protein in, but there's other aspects, other benefits that, what else is even in this? Why is this important to me?
We talked about this being a carrier food and getting more of those other nutrients in. So I talk about protein a lot on my podcast. It's a hot topic, but we also want to get more of those plant-based foods in. But with the protein, if we don't get adequate protein, then we lose muscle, and that's not good for our metabolism.
Right.
And that aging muscle loss starts as early as our 30s. So it's never too late to start thinking about,
I'll let you know when I get to my 30s.
I know, right? way beyond that.
Right, same.
But it is much more than protein. And again, we talked about like healthy dietary patterns. So what pork brings to the table is also some important vitamins and minerals. A 3-ounce serving is an excellent source of many B vitamins, including thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, vitamin B6, and vitamin B12, which is only found in animal foods. So that's key.
Ooh, good to know.
Yeah. So if you're not eating any animal foods, you do need to look into how you're going to get your B12 and talk with a healthcare provider.
You need to get some supplements, honey.
Something, yes. And then like if somebody's has some animal products in their diet, they might, but also selenium and zinc. And it's a good source of choline, pantothenic acid, and phosphorus. So I mentioned I've got some fun recipes. Like we were saying, it doesn't, like pork can be the center of your plate if you want. Keep it simple. Do that pork tenderloin roast. But it can also be like a Korean pork lettuce wrap or a kid-friendly taco cup.
Those are actually really good. Okay. Yeah, I do like those.
So it's just incorporating other foods. It's not just necessarily it's the center of the plate. So you mentioned you hadn't really thought much about lean ground pork.
No.
But that could be used in a taco cup or a taco bowl or a taco bar. So the 96% lean ground pork, incorporating some different vegetables into this, and then all your different toppings, so I have that recipe. I can give that to you.
Yeah, I will need that. We do taco bowls like once a week at home because they're easy, and I can also like reuse some of the stuff. Like
it's a good way to use up food waste and to have different people want different toppings and
I'm like okay, because I'm not going to eat a whole can of black olives or whatever. Like we're having this again on Tuesday, so, you know what I mean?
Taco Tuesday.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, and then like the lettuce wraps. I mean, we've all had lettuce wraps at some point. I think where it's very simple with this particular recipe. You make the pork tenderloin and you cut it into pieces. Well, you don't make it. You take the pork tenderloin and you cut it into pieces, and then you saute that with some different marinades. Actually, you marinate it. It can be 2 to 24 hours, which I like because sometimes I'm that person who is like, oh, I only have a couple of hours or a couple of minutes before dinner. I didn't marinate something the day before.
I never do that.
Yeah.
I don't. Who's thinking that far ahead?
It's a lot, right? So I like these shorter marinades. And just like, the cucumbers, carrots, sesame seeds, scallions, things like that go on top. So
easy, delicious.
Both of those recipes for you.
Okay. Friend to all foods. That I'm going to need a t-shirt that says that too, by the way. But can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, the Friend to All Foods is kind of a nod to that pork and partners or that carrier food aspect. Yeah. So pork partners with all these other nutrient-rich foods that we're trying to get people to eat more of. And as we talked about with pork being an ingredient, necessarily the center of the plate, which is fine too. So that's what the Friend to All Foods mean. It's just a reminder that it pairs with so many different flavors and all these global cuisines as well and global flavors.
Is that like an IPPA thing?
That's a National Pork Board thing.
Okay.
There's some research that have this whole wheel of flavors, but I know we don't have time. But
let me see that wheel of flavors.
Yes. So pork and plants is a world of flavors. So there's over 100 different flavor nuances in pork. And so if you look at different parts of the world, you'll see different traditional dishes or the ways that they cook with the different flavors. And some of that might look familiar to you.
Yes, everything in Asia and South America. That seems to be my jam. Oh, North America too, obviously. All right. Yeah. I've got some work to do when it comes to Europe and Africa. I've got more things to try.
But you've heard of, like with Africa, you've heard of pork and peanut stew.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
So, right.
And
then with Asia, the banh mi. Oh, that you already said Asia. Yeah, Europe. There's like a pork souvlaki. So, so because it is the number one consumed protein worldwide, it just makes sense that all these different cuisines.
We're not going to run out of ways to use it and love it.
Exactly. And I just want to reiterate that Illinois pork producers are committed to providing consumers with a nutritious product for themselves and their families.
Loving it. All right, I'm going to go get the ground pork now. I'm going to do that. I'm going to try that. I'm going to get back to you. I'm going to let you know what I made out of it.
You can use it even in your lasagna or your meat sauce for pasta.
Good, because I only like to kind of cook like once or twice a week and then eat it for the rest of the week.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Now, where can we find you, your podcast?
Yes, my podcast is Sound Bites, a nutrition podcast with Melissa Joy Dobbins. My website is soundbitesrd.com. I'm on Instagram at melissajoyrd. And you can also get these recipes at pork.org. And you can follow Pork and Partners on Instagram, at Pork and Partners, at National Pork Board, and at Illinois Pork.
Loving it. Okay, so do that and get some of these recipes, and I guess I'll race you to the air fryer.
Okay.
Perfect.